Ameer Al-Fahd, the Dubai billionaire with everything money could buy, and Layla Hassan, the stunning bride who seemed to complete his perfect fairy tale. On their wedding night, their story flipped from glamour to horror, leaving behind a crime scene that shocked the world. The Crime Scene presents a new page of crime, a new mystery, a new shock case. Dubai doesn't do small weddings, and this one looked like something ripped straight out of a billionaire's fantasy. The ballroom sat high above the city in a luxury skyscraper, walls made of glass showing off the glowing skyline. Crystal chandeliers threw sparks of light across gold-draped tables stacked with caviar, imported roses, and champagne bottles that cost more than most people's rent for a year. The groom made his entrance like royalty, a man who'd built his name on flashy real estate projects and an endless trail of nightlife investments. He was young, rich, and hungry for status, and tonight he had it all. The bride was the real showstopper. She floated into the room in a gown dripping with diamonds, her dark hair pinned perfectly, her every step followed by camera flashes. Social media erupted the second she appeared, hashtags flooding timelines in minutes. The couple's names trended across continents. Their wedding, called the event of the year before the night, had even ended. Every guest in attendance posted their version of the magic, from gold leaf desserts to private performances from international stars flown in just for the occasion. From the outside, the whole thing looked flawless, a love story sealed with wealth and beauty. The guests raised glasses, fireworks cracked against the sky, and for a moment, it felt like nothing could touch them. But not everyone in the room was blinded by the glitter. A few guests exchanged quiet looks, their smiles hiding whispers. Some thought they recognized the bride from a different life, a different scene, one that didn't match the polished image she was selling now. The music drowned out the murmurs, the laughter disguised the tension, but underneath the sparkle, a thin thread of suspicion hummed. No one knew it yet, but this fairy tale night was the first step into a tragedy that would stain Dubai's glittering skyline forever. Long before she was draped in diamonds and hailed as Dubai's new princess, the bride came from a world nobody at that wedding wanted to talk about. Her life started in the city's forgotten corners, where money was tight and choices were even tighter. Survival meant adapting, and she learned fast how to turn charm into currency. She wasn't born into luxury. She built a mask to fit in with it. Nights were spent drifting through underground clubs where the music was loud, the crowd was reckless, and connections could either make you rich or ruin you overnight. Her beauty got her through doors that would have stayed locked for anyone else, but beauty always came at a price. She found herself tied to people who thrived on risk, hustlers who knew how to bend the rules and dance in the gray areas of Dubai's glitzy underground. Photos from those nights lingered, tucked away on old phones and dusty hard drives. Secrets that should have disappeared kept floating around in hushed conversations, passed from one circle to another like whispers nobody wanted to admit hearing. By the time she met the groom, she had already reinvented herself. Expensive dresses, polished manners, and the kind of confidence money usually buys became her armor. To him, she looked flawless, untouchable, like a woman cut from royal cloth. She thought she'd buried her past deep enough that it would never claw its way back. This wedding was supposed to be her final transformation, the chance to lock away the girl she once was and step fully into the life she'd always dreamed about. But Dubai has a way of never letting secrets stay buried. In a city where everyone's watching and nothing truly disappears, her past was just waiting for the perfect moment to resurface. That moment came faster than she ever expected. The groom wasn't the type to take chances on anything, especially not his reputation. He had built his empire on being in control, always one step ahead of everyone else. In his world, trust was currency and betrayal was poison. So when a few whispers about his bride's past reached his ears just before the wedding, he brushed them off at first, thinking it was just jealousy or gossip meant to stir drama. But something about the way people said it, the confidence in their tone, started clawing at him. He couldn't let it go. That night, after the celebrations died down and the guests had slipped back into their cars, he started digging. Dubai's elite had ways of finding information the rest of the world couldn't touch. Within hours, files, photos, and scraps of her old life were on his phone. What he saw sent a jolt through his chest. There she was, The bride he'd just paraded in front of the world, caught up in scenes that screamed scandal. Clubs, people he despised, situations that made his stomach twist. For a man who thrived on pride, it wasn't just disappointment, it was humiliation. He pictured the headlines if this ever came out, the laughter behind closed doors, the rivals who'd feast on his downfall. His fairy tale bride suddenly looked like a trap, and instead of love, all he felt was fury. The glossy image he thought he bought into was shattered into shards he couldn't piece back together. By the time they entered the penthouse suite, his rage had already taken the wheel. The smile he'd worn in front of cameras hours earlier was long gone, replaced with a storm that wouldn't quiet down. The honeymoon wasn't going to be champagne and roses. It was about to be something far darker. The penthouse suite was supposed to be the crown jewel of the night, perched high above Dubai with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glowing city. Everything inside screamed wealth. Marble floors, silk sheets, gold-plated fixtures, and champagne chilling on ice. But the air wasn't filled with romance or laughter. It was heavy, tense, almost suffocating. The groom carried his anger inside like a ticking bomb, every glance at his bride reminding him of the files and images he'd uncovered just hours earlier. He couldn't see the woman in front of him anymore. All he saw was the secret past that made him feel like a fool. The explosion came quick. What started as silence broke into chaos. Crystal glasses hit the floor, shattering into shards across the marble. A designer lamp toppled, spraying sparks as the bulb burst. Furniture was knocked over like dominoes, and the noise inside that room could have been mistaken for a storm ripping through the city. The bride, once the center of every camera flash, became the target of blind rage. She tried to fight against it, but the violence swallowed her up. Neighbors on the next floor later claimed they heard strange thuds echoing through the walls, but in a tower where privacy was sacred, nobody dared to interfere. Hours bled into the night, and then, just as suddenly as it started, everything went silent. The chaos stopped, leaving only the eerie glow of Dubai's skyline pouring into the wrecked suite. By dawn, the scene had shifted from luxury to tragedy. The bride lay lifeless, her gown ripped, her beauty erased by bruises and blood. The groom, shaken but eerily calm, stood in the ruins of what was meant to be his fairy tale night. When hotel staff eventually unlocked the door, they didn't step into a honeymoon. They walked straight into a crime scene that would shock the world. The moment he realized what had happened, the groom's instincts flipped from rage to survival. He wasn't about to let one night destroy everything he had built. In his world, money wasn't just power, it was an eraser. He picked up the phone, and within minutes, his private security team swarmed the hotel like ghosts. The first order of business was simple: silence. Staff were rounded up, phones confiscated, and anyone who had seen or heard too much was pulled aside. Thick envelopes stacked with cash slid across polished tables, each one carrying the unspoken promise that loyalty was worth more than truth. The penthouse itself was scrubbed like nothing ever happened. Bloody sheets vanished. Broken crystal was replaced with brand new sets flown in before sunrise, and a crew of cleaners worked with military precision to erase every trace of chaos. Even the digital trail was tampered with. Hotel servers mysteriously wiped, security footage corrupted before investigators could ever request it. By the time the cover-up was in full swing, the official story was being spun: a tragic accident, nothing more. For a while, it seemed airtight. Staff members kept their heads down, frightened of losing their jobs or worse, and the hotel management went along with the narrative to protect its pristine reputation. But money doesn't buy every soul. One young bellboy who had slipped into the hallway during the noise saw enough to know this wasn't an accident. He remembered the groom's wild expression, the sounds of violence, the sight of destruction inside the suite before the cleanup crew sealed it shut. When investigators came knocking, the bellboy couldn't stomach the payoff shoved into his hands. His quiet testimony became the loose thread that unraveled the billionaire's entire cover-up. What the groom thought was buried under gold and silence began to surface, dragging the truth into the light piece by piece. Once the truth began to leak, it spread faster than wildfire in the desert. The story of the Dubai bride murder was impossible to contain. Within hours, international news outlets plastered the groom's name and face across their front pages, pairing it with glamorous wedding photos that now looked haunting in hindsight. Clips of the lavish ceremony were replayed side by side with headlines calling it a nightmare, and the public was hooked. Everyone wanted to know how the fairy tale ended in blood. Social media poured gasoline on the fire. Hashtags demanding justice trended worldwide, and users turned into amateur detectives, digging into the bride's past and the groom's empire like it was a sport. Some defended the bride as a victim who never escaped her demons, while others painted her as a woman who played too dangerous a game. Either way, the internet couldn't get enough, and each theory only pushed the story higher into the spotlight. For the groom, the fallout was brutal. Investors bailed overnight, business partners cut ties, and stock tied to his real estate ventures plummeted. Companies that once celebrated his wealth now wanted nothing to do with his name. In Dubai's glittering social circles, his invitations dried up, and the same people who toasted his wedding whispered about his downfall over champagne. Authorities, once hesitant to move against such a powerful figure, now felt the weight of the global spotlight. Every delay, every inconsistency, was dissected by millions of eyes online. Investigators were forced to treat the case like a priority, knowing the world was watching for cracks in the system. The man who once seemed untouchable was cornered. No bribe could silence the viral storm, and no luxury lawyer could erase the damning headlines. His empire wasn't just crumbling, it was collapsing in real time, broadcast for the whole world to witness. The courtroom became the stage where every dark secret finally spilled out. Reporters packed the benches, cameras swarmed the entrance, and the groom, once draped in designer suits and dripping with confidence, walked in shackled, his face pale and hollow. The prosecution wasted no time painting him as a man consumed by ego, a billionaire who thought he could buy silence after destroying a life. They laid out the evidence piece by piece. The hotel staff who cracked under questioning, the bellboy's testimony, the security footage fragments that had been salvaged, and the forensic report that made it clear the bride's injuries could never be mistaken for an accident. The defense fought hard, dragging up the bride's past in a desperate attempt to smear her reputation, but the jury wasn't biting. What mattered wasn't who she used to be, but what had happened that night in the penthouse suite. Every detail of the cover-up, every payoff, every shred of arrogance turned the groom into a villain in the eyes of the court. The public outside chanted for justice, their voices echoing like a drumbeat through the city. When the verdict came down, it hit like a thunderclap, guilty. The groom's empire collapsed in one swift blow, his billions meaningless as the judge sentenced him to spend decades behind bars. There would be no penthouse views, no private jets, no champagne to numb the sting. Just steel bars, cold walls, and the memory of the night that destroyed everything. For the world, the case became a cautionary tale, a story of how power, money, and image can't hide the truth forever. The bride, once silenced, became immortalized as the woman whose tragedy pulled the mask off a man who thought he was untouchable. In the end, justice didn't just catch up, it dragged him down for everyone to see.